Hey there, friends and running fans. This is Amby Burfoot welcoming you to the latest episode of the podcast, Running State of the Sport.
And this is George Hirsch, your co-host at Running State of the Sport. In every episode, we talk to the smartest, most informed, most influential, and sometimes fastest runners on the planet.
This week we have a terrific conversation with Ed Eyestone, the amazingly successful distance coach at Brigham Young University. Ed himself was a two-time Olympic marathoner, and now he's coached to Connor Mantz and Clayton Young, the guys who went 1-2 in the U.S. marathon trials last February.
Ed somehow manages that on top of his full-time job as BYU's head cross-country and track coach. BYU will have 7 current athletes or recent graduates competing in the Paris Olympics. So it's clear that his program is working well. When you listen to Ed, you'll understand why. The story behind steeplechase runner James Corrigan's Olympic journey is basically unbelievable, so stay tuned. But before speaking with Ed, Amby and I want to review the biggest running news, and that, of course, is the Netflix documentary called Sprint, which takes us behind the scenes with the world's best 100 and 200-meter runners.
So I've seen the first 2 episodes, George. I guess you might call them the Noah Lyles episode and the Sha'Carri Richardson episode. And my first thought is, these guys did not have a small budget. They went all the way in. They have gathered a ton of incredible photos and videos. They've got stuff from the competition track, behind the scenes in training, at the athlete's home, and the quality is really top notch. So there's tremendous content behind this show. When they put it all together, I'll have to admit I found the editing and narrative a bit staccato and rapid fire and hard to follow. Sometimes I wasn't sure where we were, and other times I wasn't sure when we were because of all the flashbacks and flash forwards. Maybe I'm too old for this sort of presentation. I will definitely give credit to the filmmakers. They put a lot of energy into what they did, and the characters themselves are extraordinarily interesting and energetic. So I did watch the first 2 episodes all the way through. I didn't drop out, and I'll probably watch all 6 of the episodes in due time. I think you've actually gotten to the end, George. What did you think?
Should watch them all, Amby. I watched all 6, and not only that, I've read a certain amount of things on social media and some of the running websites, and there's been critiques and commentary and a good bit of back and forth, but I'm kind of ready to step back and take what I think is the big picture on the Sprint Netflix series, and that is the bottom line is it's bringing more eyeballs into this sport and getting more people revved up just prior to the Olympics. The timing couldn't be better. The protagonists, as you said, Sha'Carri Richardson, Noah Lyles, Gabby Thomas, the Jamaicans, Sharika, Shelley Ann Fraser-Price. These are some terrific personalities. And Amby, I also love getting to know a little bit some of the people who support them. The coaches, Noah Lyles' mother, who's a great personality in and of herself. You and I well remember Dennis Mitchell, who was a great sprinter running with Carl Lewis in that wonderful era of American sprint stars. And now he's coaching Sha'Carri, and you got a great feeling from Dennis Mitchell, I thought, about the warmth and support he brings to her. I mean, she's obviously a huge talent, and yet she seemed a vulnerable personality in many ways, and he's protective of her, and he's a big bear of a guy, and he takes care of her, and beyond the technical aspects of running 100 meters, I think he brings an awful lot, and it shows what's behind the scenes of making a champion like that. And I have to tell you, I love the Jamaican coaches. Steve Francis, he was made out of Hollywood with that Morgan Freeman voice of his. You couldn't beat it. So I think there was an awful lot good. But the main part of it is I've been tracking it, and I see on Netflix that this show has been among the top 6 shows on Netflix, with averaging 2.6 million viewers. That's an awful lot for our sport. And to bring all of that in and to get them engaged. These are people now who I think are going to be revved up and excited for Paris. We know that what brought this show about was the incredible interest of the Formula One show that Netflix did, Drive to Survive, and what interest it brought to that fan base, which had not been a particularly American fan base, very big in Europe, Formula One. But now Americans are walking around and talking about Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, and I think some of the same is going to be happening here. And I think also we've talked for a long time about the fact that our sport needs younger fans. And if I'm not wrong, I think a fair amount of that Netflix audience are younger fans who are really intrigued with seeing these personalities. And some of them are, they're kind of bigger than life. Noah Lyles, where he gets all that confidence from, I have no idea, but you've got to have it if you're going to run 100 meters. So that to me kind of is the biggest running news from running State of the Sport.
Now let's turn to Ed Eyestone, this week's guest on the Running State of the Sport podcast. Ed is the head cross-country and track coach at Brigham Young University, a 2-time Olympic marathoner himself, coach to the 2 U.S. Olympic marathoners, Conor Mantz and Clayton Young, who'll be competing in Paris, and quite unexpectedly, at least to me and George, and maybe to Ed himself, he's coached to a steeplechase runner named James Corrigan, who's going to Paris. He was perhaps the biggest surprise at the Olympic track trials, so we'll be asking Ed plenty about him. Ed, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's great to be here, and look forward to talking to you.
So, Ed, we like to start off these conversations with some just basic bio questions for our listeners. And why don't you just tell us, your age and where you grew up, where you're living now, your family, you're married, kids, so on, and what you do to fill out the hours of your day when you're not coaching and thinking about running.
Great, George. I appreciate you starting out with my age, because I'm not conscious about that at all, because of course, we all think we're still 29 years of age. But no, I just a few weeks ago celebrated my 63rd anniversary of this ride around on this planet we call the Earth, around the sun. 63 years young, and as I said, I still am amazed when I look at myself and see my father staring back at me. But for those of your listeners who have been around in some fraction of that time, might know that my early years were, I was a student at Brigham Young University. I ran, I think, 8 or 9 World Cross Country Championships. I was third back in 1980 in Paris, France. My first international trip, I was third at the World Cross Country Championships, and that kind of opened my eyes to the expanse of what is running at the world level. And from that point on, I was able to continue competing and was, as you mentioned, competed in the 1988 and the 1992 Olympic Games in the marathon, and then was kind of a running bum for about 15 years post-collegiately. I competed until I was almost 40 years of age, and it was a wonderful existence and time, an interesting way to make a living, and an adventurous time for myself and my wife, Lynn. During that time, we had 6 daughters join our family, and we've raised them all to be upstanding, fine citizens. And my youngest is actually a junior in college at this point in time. So we're verging on that empty nest sort of syndrome. And I competed until I was almost 40 years of age. And at that point in time, as I was slowing down and the competition was getting faster, I was blessed that my old college track coach, Cheryl James, was at the point of retirement. And as he retired, I was able to step in the year 2000. And I've been the head men's cross country coach since that time. And in the last 10 plus years, I've been the head track and field coach as well. So it's been fun coming back to my old alma mater, BYU, back in 2000. So that makes about 24 years that I've been here. And if you count in the 4 years as a student athlete, I've been almost 30 years as a coach or a student athlete here at BYU. And it's been a good ride. And one of the great things about it, probably the best thing about it, is the secret sauce of our sport is just the young men and the young women that I get to interact with on a daily basis, particularly the young man that I have direct coaching duties over. And it's been fun to see, be a part at least of their, running journey, trying to work with them to accomplish their running dreams. And we had some pretty good dreams come true in terms of at least making Olympic teams in the relative recent past, with getting Connor Mantz and Clayton Young to qualify in the Olympic for the United States to run the Olympic marathon in Paris. And then most recently at the track and field trials, we had Kenneth Rooks, who was an NCAA runner of ours just last cross-country season, who had recently gone professional. He won the steeplechase. And then, as you had mentioned, Amby, the biggest surprise was James Corrigan, who came from finishing 9th at the NCAA championships, and then over the course of 2 weeks, moved up to getting 3rd at the Olympic trials, and then having a dramatic chase to get the Olympic A standard that ultimately put him on the team.
Hey, Ed, good. You took a breath, and I'm going to stop you because you would answer all of my questions in one fell swoop, because you are thoughtful and articulate and know how to do this. I think the first thing that you just seem to have confirmed is the scientific truth that male marathoners only have female daughters. Is that true?
It's certainly apocryphal. And back in my day, you'll remember Mark Platjes, who was a world champion in the marathon. At least at the time when we occasionally would train together, I think he had 3 daughters, and I don't know if that changed subsequent to that. But and a number of my friends also have been blessed with female offspring as well. And there's been unscientific but apocryphal messages, at least, that when you hit a certain amount of mileage, you tend to have daughters. And if that's the case, then I think everyone should run at least 100 miles a week so that their life can be blessed with the amazing young women that now are in the orbit of my life.
That's fantastic. Go ahead, George.
Let's chat a little bit about your 2 Olympic marathons. I certainly remember them. You got a 13th place in Barcelona. I certainly remember that great marathon and fantastic Olympics overall. What did you learn from those Olympic experiences, the training, the racing, and perhaps just the overall, Olympic experience itself? And what can you now pass on to, well, certainly to Clayton and Connor, who will be running the marathon?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think making those 2 Olympic teams was certainly, I'm not going to say the culmination to dreams, because obviously I I made those teams and was hopeful that I'd come home wearing a golden medal around my neck. But it certainly were high watermarks in a career because people tend to know. In fact, I was just talking with one of my assistant coaches today, talking about the number of podcasts and the number of people with cameras who are showing up to workouts and the countdown and all the, getting ready to leave for the games and all the coordination that's going on and the various news outlets they're talking with us. And I said, it's kind of interesting because when August 11th rolls around, it'll be back to business as usual because the Olympics will have passed by. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a great perspective placer of this, and also a reminder that people care about the Olympic Games. And so this is the biggest track meet in town. So doggone it, let's be ready for this track meet, and let's make sure that we are in a position to be invited and participate in this track meet. And so I think that's why it's such a big deal. The world takes notice, right or wrong, specifically every 4 years. And what I learned during my Olympic experience certainly was the importance of getting a ticket to the games first and foremost is being in a position to make the team. In 1988, I was essentially a rookie in terms of, I think the Olympic trials was my probably second serious marathon. I had run one in college and run 2:16 and thought, I just did it between seasons and thought, this is nothing, man. I ran 2:16, in the middle of indoor season in Houston. I focus for this thing and I'm going to knock it out of the park because I can run 10K a minute faster than some of these yahoos who are running 2:08, 2:09. How hard can it be? And then a couple of years after that, when I really got serious about it, and I thought I'd debut with a little low-key marathon they hold in Boston in the springtime called the Boston Marathon, and I trained specifically for that thing. Then I learned that the marathon is a fickle beast, and it can clean your hide if you're not well prepared for it. Because in that particular marathon, where I thought I had prepared adequately, I ended up running with the leaders through about 15 or 16, and then I experienced the agony of defeat in that survival shuffle for at least the last 5 miles, and came in with a 2:19 that barely qualified me for the Olympic trials. And my wife, Lynn, was waiting for me at the finish line. I said, honey, if I ever want to run a marathon again, talk me out of it because it is not fun. I was running, 5:30 miles there over the last few miles. Don't let me do this again. And that bitter taste in my mouth lasted for about a week. And then I said, hey, I did sneak under the 2:20 qualifying mark for the 1988 Olympic trials. I'm going to see if I can do anything differently and see if it turns out differently. And fortunately it did. And I had a good race in my third marathon and actually made that first Olympic team. Coming back and making the team again 4 years later, then I was considered one of the favorites going in. And fortunately, things worked out on that day as well. So the first and foremost thing about the Olympic Games is punch your ticket. Do everything in your power to be in a good place and punch that ticket. And the number one thing that marathoners need to keep in mind when they go to the starting line is you want to go to the starting line healthy because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And what I've found, at least with the guys that I work with, is I'd rather underdo it than overdo it a little bit going in. Let's be a little bit fresher and hopefully healthy as you go in. So those are a few things that I picked up. And I guess in terms of preparation is let's be healthy. And then when we are healthy, let's just do our best on race day.
Ed, we might get back a little later to some of those lifetime lessons that you have picked up. But first, I got to ask a slightly trick question. You had a marathon best, I believe, of 2:10:59 at Chicago in 1990. Of course, the question is, could you beat Connor and Clayton today if you had their shoes and their Mortons and their frozen water balloons?
And their coach?
And their coaching, sure.
Actually, I kind of had their coach at the time because I was kind of self-coaching. By the time we hit 92, myself and my training partner Paul Pilkington would put our heads together and say, "Oh, wait, I think we need to try this, that, or the other thing." Um, yeah, I mean, I give them a hard time a little bit about that. In fact, Connor Mantz was all of my athletes, my pro athletes that I'm currently coaching, also ran, and so I ran in college here, and so I coached them in college. And Connor Mantz, a number of them, ran faster than I did in the 3,000 or the 5,000, but no one's got my 10,000 record yet, which was a pretty solid record back in the day, 27:41. At the time, it was the American collegiate record, and I was probably known more of a 10K cross country guy than I was a true marathoner. That's why it was a surprise when I transitioned up. But Connor came within a second of it twice in college. He ran 27:41 and missed it by 0.5 one time and maybe less than a second another time. I was prepared, though, should he have dipped under that, by saying, well, yeah, give me the shoes that you're in, and I'm going to take 25 seconds off. Anything, and they've already surpassed me in terms of my marathon speed, certainly. And some of that is shoes, certainly, but a lot of it is just their grit and their determination and their talent and all of those good things. So I don't, when you get to an age, certainly north of 40, when you realize you're not going to be PRing anymore, then you have to live vicariously. And as a coach, the best way to live vicariously is obviously through your athletes and seeing the joy that comes to them. So when they break 208, I break 208, and I'm wanting to break 205 and 204 here in the not so distant future. And so I'm hoping that that's some of the next steps they have.
So let's just turn to the steeplechase, which we mentioned earlier, for a second, Ed. And obviously, Kenneth Rooks, I think, was going into the trials someone we expected to be heading for Paris. But as we talked earlier in the opener, James Corrigan is really quite a story. A year ago, this was an 8:52 steepler. It's a long way from an Olympic team. And he had finished ninth, not an impressive finish in the NCAA championships back in only June. But then he improved to 8:21 at the Olympic trials, where he got third, but the Olympic standard was 8:15. Why don't you take it from there? How did you get him quickly to get to the Olympic qualifying?
Well, I'd like to think of myself as an optimist. But I'm also, I've been doing this business for a long time. I mean, if you take into account the years that I was running and now coaching, from the time I'm 20 to 63, that's what is 43, and throw in a couple of years when I was 18. So I've been doing it 45 years. So to have that expectation that he, in the first place, was going to be finishing third place, we were happy that he made the final. And it wasn't as big a surprise because if you saw him at the NCAA, there are 2 rounds at the NCAA. In the prelims of the NCAA, he set a nice PR and ran 8:28, and that's a good indication. But that was a nice PR just to win his preliminary heat, and it was really the first time NCAA's, I think, was a crucial preparation for the Olympic trials because it was the first time he had to bounce back with prelims and then finals, and so within 48 hours. He ran a PR 8:28, and then he came back and he ran 8:29. And yes, he finished ninth, but it wasn't as if he really bonked in that final. It was just the first time that he'd done back-to-back steeples in 48 hours. And so, it was a good sign that at least his consistent ceiling now was in the high 8:20s. Now, when you're in the high 8:20s, that's still a far removed from running 8:13. But the way that I think the knowledge that we learned from running rounds, he was able to apply when we went to the Olympic trials. So at the Olympic trials, he looked really good in the prelims, running 8:21. I think we just worked on, recovery, making sure he got the protein and carbs in immediately after. He kind of lived in the recovery boots for the next 48 hours. And then that set him up for a really good final at NCAA, final at the Olympic trials, which was aided by his teammate Kenneth Rooks throwing down, basically running too flat over barriers over the last 800, which really stretched the field as they attempted to go with him and left a debris field for Corrigan to kind of wade through, which ended up him being able to pass, I think, 4 or 5 people in the last 400 meters and getting him on the team. Now, as you mentioned, the Olympics is a twofold process. You have to finish in the top 3 at the Olympic trials, but you also have to have that Olympic standard. And since he didn't have that, then we had no other choice than to, I guess we could have just given up on it and said, well, great job. You finished 3rd in Olympic trials. You don't get a go. But immediately, I'm talking within 5 minutes of him crossing that line, is we had our cell phones up and we were scouring the schedules for any race that would be available. And a running website reached out to me and said, hey, Ed, we've got news that Uzbekistan has a steeplechase that would qualify him next Sunday, which would still be in the window. And I said, Uzbekistan's a long way away. I would rather not have to fly halfway around the world. And I think it's unseasonably warm there right now. And who knows what the competition is? Can't we find something closer? And fortunately, there was an all-comers meet pretty much at Penn. And again, fortuitously, Aaron Robinson was one of my athletes over a decade ago, is now the one of the race directors there at Penn, and specifically the race director for Penn Relays, which everybody knows about, is the largest track meet in the world. But he also puts on a summer series, and this particular race, the summer series number 2, I think it was called, was on the schedule and was a athletics World Athletics certified meet, which I've got to hand it to him, because he had to know 3 months ago and have the wherewithal to go, you know what, it might be nice to have a World Athletics certified meet the weekend of when the window closes. And so hats off to him for being inspired to do the paperwork to make it a World Athletics sanctioned meet, when it could have been easy for him just to say, this is kind of an all-comers meet, who's going to show up, why even bother with the extra legwork to do it. So once we found out that that was a World Athletics certified meet, that certainly was a better option than going to Uzbekistan. And
you think?
Immediately we said, okay, is there a steeple? And there wasn't a steeple initially that was even on the map there, but it was something that, because it was already a certified meet, they were able to add in whatever sections that they wanted to, and they quickly added the steeplechase, and we said, okay, let's populate this steeple with as many good people as we can, and that's what we went about and did. And I can get into, first thing we did is, you can't run this by yourself. I mean, it's going to be hard enough to run 8:15 on your own. You got plenty of motivation now that you finished in the top 3, but how on earth are you going to run that on your own? Kenneth Rooks, his teammate, who won in the dominant fashion the steeplechase final, and had already secured his spot due to the fact that he had enough, points to get in. He didn't have the automatic time either, but we knew he was safe from his world ranking. He volunteered to help out, which I thought was very, magnanimous of him to do. I wasn't exactly that excited about him having to run a third steeplechase because I didn't want him to get injured in the process, and I don't want to compromise his performance at the games. But long story short, we were able to find another young man, Daniel Mikowski, who had done just a phenomenal job rabbiting the sound running meet for Kenneth Rooks earlier in the year. And Kenneth said, hey, that Dan Mikowski did a great job rabbiting through 2K at the sound running meet. Let's see if he would be interested in doing it. So long story short, we got him out there, and the rest is history. I mean, I can take you through the race if you'd like, but it was a barn burner, and certainly added a few gray hairs on my head But
Ed, we're gonna move back to the marathon, but I will say that the whole Corrigan story is like one of the biggest impossible dreams I've ever heard of in running, because 8:15 and then 8:13 that he ran, that's no sneeze. That doesn't just happen because you go to one more meet. He must have put his heart and soul and a whole lot more into that race.
well, I've told people numerous times that amazing things can happen when you have a 22-year-old who does not know the impossibility of the task which you have just asked him to perform. And given the fact that he was on the team, if he could run the time, he really did the two most difficult things. One, he beat the competition, and then a week later, running his third steeplechase in 8 days, he beat the clock. And it would not have happened without the help of Daniel Mikowski taking him through 2K right on. But then he had to run that long last 2.5 laps on his own with the crowd cheering, with his coach screaming himself hoarse, with Kenneth Rooks, who was didn't rabbit but was on the sidelines also cheering for him, and he had to dig down for that last 400. But when he crossed the line, it really was kind of a boys in the boat sort of moment. I've said this also, that 50 years from now, somebody needs to write this up, and nobody's going to believe it. But it was a great culmination to an Olympic dream, at least the beginning of an Olympic dream for James Corrigan.
It was fantastic.
Really.
And Ed, last February 3rd in Orlando was a pretty good day for you also. I would say that it's one thing for one guy to have a good race on the given day at the trials. To have your two top marathoners both have great days on trials date, that's many, many magnitudes more difficult, 2 out of 2. Where were you that day? I assume you were there on the course, running around, screaming your head off. What was it like to watch this thing unfold? And did you even dare dream that you'd get a 1-2 finish beforehand?
Well, to tell you the truth, that morning as I was shaving, I looked myself in the mirror and I just said, if one of these guys makes the team, Ed, you've got to be happy about this. If one makes the team, you've got to be happy. You're going to have to, deal with the disappointment from the other because they've worked so hard to be in a position. And they were also in the awkward position that, unfortunately, USA Track and Field had kind of put him in. And I don't blame them. It was a combination of them and NBC Sports, probably, that the trials, people hosting the trials want to have the first 2 or 3 people across the line be declared Olympians. But Connor and Clayton were the only 2 that had the Olympic standard. And so they came up with the idea of reallocation of their times to the first 2 people across the finish line. And, there's plenty of arguments against that. And one would be, hey, that's just not American. These guys earned those spots by running fast at Chicago. And yet we love the trials process. We love the fact that, you're putting everybody there together and they should be able to, scrap it out and first 3 across the line make it. But they ran through that gauntlet. They got the times. They punched the ticket for 2 Americans back in October. And then I told them, hey, this is not going to be fair if somebody else claims your prize. So let's go to the trials and let's defend it. Let's defend this fort. Let's defend this house. Let's defend those times that you guys worked so hard to in October. And Amby, as good as anyone, probably better than most, how difficult it is even to turn around in 3.5 months time and deliver another home run after running a fast time. So you're exactly right. I was very prepared of maybe one of them having it, but just knowing the crapshoot that is the marathon, even when you're best prepared, that the likelihood of them going 1-2 might have been a stretch. And to answer your question, yes, I was out on the course. I was not running around because it would have been difficult for me to get to all the points I wanted to be, but we had a bike. We had some bikes that we had just gotten. We probably taken them out of bounds because I think they were more for I got them from some resort and crammed them into the car that I had and took them to where I could wheel them around in Orlando. And I had about 3 different places each lap. So I was able to see them about 8 or 9 times. And the race just played out just as we wanted. We in fact, I had diagrammed out and I said, okay, this is hokey, but we got 3 C's here. We got to we got to chill the first 10K or more, chill for as long as possible, meaning don't lead the thing, let somebody else do it. And then we've got the second C was, first C was chill. The second C was, I think, cover any moves that take place after 10K. And then, close hard. When you sniff the finish line, you got to run hard to the finish and close well. And I'd prefer if you guys could wait until at least 22 miles before you go for that. And it really just played out just like we'd written up, which again, Amby and George, you guys know, it doesn't usually play out that well. But fortunately, the first 10K was fairly pedestrian. They were able to just and it was difficult for Connor to chill in the pack because he loves to have his nose up front. But he did a great job just waiting, being patient for as long as he could. Then when Zach Panning made a monster move, and then all hats off to him because he really kind of made that race, then they were able to cover that move along with, initially 6, 7, 8 other people, and be patient, cover the move, wait until it got down to just a few people. And by 22, then it was just a 3-man race at that time with Zach in the lead, Connor and Clayton. And at 22 miles, as kind of we had written it up, then I think Connor was chomping at the bit so hard he finally took that first step in the lead, and then it was that was the real race to see what would happen. And Zach did a great job, kind of gathering himself, running with them for a long, another couple miles, and then over the last two, Connor and then Clayton. Clayton felt good over the last few, even more so than Connor, and I think at that point in time, then the roles were reversed that we often see with Mantz in the lead and Clayton trying to hang on. We saw Clayton kind of in the lead, kind of inspiring, saying, "Hey, I've come this far. You're going to do it too." And the two of them then were able to kind of pull it together and really enjoy the last. I don't know that Connor was really able to enjoy a whole lot until maybe the last 800. Clayton was probably enjoying it too much, and Connor was just wanting to get to the finish line. But it was a great story of teamwork and patience and kind of, having a plan and then, plan your race and then race your plan. And it doesn't always happen like that in the marathon, but it was a good day for us in February.
I love the 3 C's, and I bet it was a real motivator for those two guys. They must have kept that as a mantra in their head during the entire thing, the chill, cover, and close. I love it. So what other rules of effective marathon training, would you offer? You're a great person to ask that question to.
Well, I mean, people will often ask us, what is the secret and what's the key workout and everything. And there's, I guess that the main word that I preach to my guys is just the importance of consistency, and it's kind of an old saying of mine, but consistent competence equals eventual excellence. And I even, sometimes I'll put it on a shirt. It's got C squared equals E squared. It's a kind of a hokey little formula, but it kind of helps us to remember that you don't have to have, record-breaking workouts every day, but you need to be competent in the work that you're doing on a consistent basis. And if you can do that, get that consistent runs in, whether it be your easy mileage or your tempo runs or your long intervals or whatever it is, and your long runs, if you can be consistently competent in doing those, and that you're not blowing up, you're not going out at too hard a pace, you're not bonking, you're just being competent in the day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out work that is required, that eventually you are going to be excellent. And, excellent is a relative term, for some people with their genetic capacity and whatever, that might mean, running 4 hours for a marathon is excellent. And for others, it might mean, coming close to breaking 2 hours. And so that consistent competency equals eventual excellence. I think all of those things, you put that together with some good sound core principles, tempo runs, long runs, weekly mileage, adequate recovery is the thing that we overlook maybe the most. giving your body a chance to recover from these hard efforts. You put all those things together and you spice in some training at altitude, which I think is kind of required to perform at a world-class level. Then I think we can come close to reaching our potential.
Hey, Ed, we've got a number of additional good questions for you, and your answers are even better than our questions. So I want to ask, have you got another 10 or 12 minutes? I know you've got a running camp going on.
I'm fine.
Okay, well, then we're going to pepper you with a few more.
I'm done for the day.
So the three of us are running off at the mouth today, but your athletes, Connor and Clayton, are a month before the Olympics, or maybe it's 5 weeks to their race. So they're training their butts off. Can you give us a little insight into what they're doing and how they're doing at this point?
Yeah, sure. And for those of you who want to kind of get nuts and bolts, Connor is very open about sharing what he does on, Strava and the various social media sites. So we don't really have any secrets. I've kind of felt like, I've learned from a lot of people, and I appreciate people who are generous. And I don't necessarily I'm going to give a clinic to one and all about the nuts and bolts of everything. But if those who want to do a little homework can probably see to some extent whatever Connor is posting. But yeah, and this morning we did what we call is kind of a important workout, and it's the last really big one of this type of workout that we're do. It's called a PMP run or predicted marathon pace run, where we got up early and we did a 12-mile run at their predicted marathon pace. And for Connor, on the right course on the right day, I think it's going to be somewhere between close to 204 to 205 high. So we did a 12-mile run right at that pace. And when you do that at altitude, I think that equates that added extra 4 seconds, 5 seconds per mile that you're running at our altitude, at least. That's a pretty good workout, and it gives you a little boost of confidence that, hey, in the right conditions, I think I can run 206 sort of effort. So that's one of the workouts we do, and we tend to start and we do an 8-mile PMP, we do a 10-mile PMP, we work up to a 12-mile PMP, and then we'll come back down the ladder a little bit as we get closer to it. That's one of the workouts. We'll do that every couple of weeks, and you add in stuff that's done faster than that, tempo runs that are done a little bit faster than that. And then I like to not get too far away from the track. We get on the track and we'll tickle the 5K, 10K paces a little bit, because I've always felt, and maybe it was just because I like to do a lot of shorter races in addition to my marathons. I like to do some speed work, usually not much faster than 5K, 10K pace, but I want them to feel fast, and I want them to feel that this marathon pace that they are running is relatively slow compared to the 5K, 10K work that we will occasionally do. Because I think there's a psychological component of when you get in and you're asked to run 450 miles, and you go, well, that's not a problem because I'm running, 415 or 420 miles regularly in mile repetitions. And that's what, 30, 40 seconds slower than what I'm doing on those days when I'm kind of cranking it up on the track. So I think there's something to be said, both physically, physiologically, and also psychologically about being able to handle some faster stuff on occasion.
So I've got a question about Connor and Clayton each. Tell us one thing that makes Connor a great runner, which he obviously is, and if there was one thing you could improve or change, what might it be? And I guess I'm curious if Connor has a tendency to overtrain. He seems almost neurotic in some of the workouts and conversations I've heard with him.
Connor likes to lead. Connor likes to push. Connor likes to feel like he's getting the most out of himself. And I think that's one reason why Connor has succeeded to the level that he has. He wants to be in the room where it happens, so to speak, borrowing a phrase from Hamilton. So you're going to see him in the front of races. And that's what we love about Connor. And sometimes what we love about him can also be something that maybe keeps him from having the best race on a given day when maybe the conditions aren't right for that particular move or whatever. But that's part of his nature, and I think he's learning. I mean, the very fact that at the Olympic trials, I was able to let him, convince him to, let's not lead until the end when it counts, I think is a good sign of that. He can do that at the U.S. level and be fine with that. But at the international level, I think even he realizes that, if he goes out and tries to run 207 high pace, then that's not as fun as being, stretching yourself a little bit earlier. And I think he's had some experiences of stretching himself and then coming up a little bit short. But I also think that one has to stretch themselves on occasion to see if they are capable of making that, jump that plateau, so to speak. So I don't fault him of that. I think he's learning, and I think he's learning that you can have your cake and eat it too in some regards in terms of, if you're going to run with the lead back, then ensconce yourself in there, hide away, be carried and lifted by those guys who, might have a PR that's 2 or 3 or 4 minutes faster than yours, and be carried that way, and then let's leave something for the end. But that's, again, I think that's part of Conor's greatness is his desire to get in and mix it up. And in terms of his workouts, yes, there is a constant give and take in terms of, okay, let's maybe ratchet it back a little bit of this. Some of that, though, is also given the fact that, he's running with a guy in Clayton who very much so thinks about it, has the engineer. They're both engineers, but Clayton, I think, sometimes will break it down, specifically going, okay, I think going at these paces, I need to be a little bit more careful. And so in contrast, when you watch some of the workouts that they do, because I think Clayton now has a kind of a docu-series going on chronicling his build for the marathon, you'll see Conor pushing the workouts and Clayton just holding on and whatever. And when you compare the two, then yes, it looks like Conor is being, like you say, a little neurotic in terms of his pushing the workout. But, for him, sometimes he has to do that kind of work to get the sort of reward that he's wanting. And, it's been said comparison is a thief of joy. And I think as you compare the two, they can be different, but also they have enough of similarities where I think it's been a good working relationship with the two of them. Certainly Clayton and Conor were happy that each other made the team, because otherwise it'd be kind of training on their own, and there's no fun in that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, the world is dying to know, is Clayton going to pull the water bottle stunt again in Paris? I think he found out it was legal in Orlando. And what other stunts has he got? Because I know he's got to be working on something. He's Clayton.
I don't know that it would be up to me to reveal any secrets that he might be working on. I know that ended up being something that worked for him. My understanding is that I guess given history, I think USATF is able to actually have trainers provide ice hats theoretically, or hand them things at the water stops that they have. So I know when I first saw things like that happening, I think in 2016, and I took notice because I had Jared Ward in the race. I felt like, I don't know if that's, as fair. I guess it would be the easy thing. To me, Amby, I always felt like whatever you start the race with, that's what you have to work with, right? Other than taking the water bottle. So when I saw ice hats being given out to some athletes in 2016, I was going, well, wait, you didn't start with that. How is it that you're able to take that, even if it's off of a table, if there aren't ice hats for everyone there? That's the egalitarian nature of the marathon, right? But but my understanding is they might be available, and that countries can provide whatever ice and if frozen ice hats are available, then I think we will have our Olympic training staff handing those out. If they're not available, then a thermal bottle of some sort that is engineered by Clayton Young is legal, then I would think that Clayton would be smart to do that as well. But Clayton again will put that engineering mind of his to work and follow all the rules certainly, and try to perform to the best of his ability. And part of that will be probably managing the heat of Paris. Although I've been checking lately, and we're still a month out, but the temperatures look a little bit more moderate than I might have expected otherwise. And maybe we're just gearing up for a very warm August. But so far, so good. Starting time, I think, is 7 a.m. I think it might turn out that Orlando was warmer than what we're going to be experiencing, but we'll prepare them the best they can. We're spending some time in saunas, and we're doing some things. And yes, old school ice balloons will be employed for as much as we can in terms of pre warm up and ice vests, and in terms of having your body core temperature as cool as possible at the start. But once the gun goes off, those ice vests come off, and the ice balloons only last for the first few miles, and then you just gotta celebrate your fitness.
So Ed, our podcast is called Running State of the Sport. So we ask everyone about their thoughts on the state of the sport. Where do you think the sport is doing well, and where could it use some improvement?
Well, where is it doing well? Of course, I'm a Division I college coach, have been for the last 25 years, and what I've seen on the college ranks is just amazing. The amount of talent and the amazing men and women that are emerging from the NCAA system. I think we do a great job preparing athletes both for the U.S. Olympic team and for, really internationally. We've got huge international stars that get their development through the NCAA system. So I think that's a good thing. I think in terms of making the step up from running the 5K and 10K in college to then running the marathon. The marathon on the world scene is so big, so such a big attraction. Every major metropolitan area now has their own marathon, and there's plenty of opportunities with that. And I think people are successfully making that transition. It's fun for me to be able to work with the athletes that I am as they've made that transition, and certainly Connor and Clayton are two of those that have done that successfully, at least on the American level. I think we're going to see. People are hemming and hawing about the quality of our American male marathoners, I think, sometimes. And all you can do is the best you can in the space that you're at. I feel like the guys that I've worked with have done extremely well. I think that there are other people, obviously the Grant Fishers of the world, as they transition up and move to the marathon, they have great capacity and great ability. We haven't seen everyone who's made that step up from a fast 10K to necessarily. I mean, I found out, I was one of the faster ones in the world, and when I was running 27:41 back when that was a fast time, and I made that step thinking, oh wow, I'm going to easily run 2:07 given how fast I was as a 10,000 meter runner. But it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation. And if you look at my PRs and whatnot, even though I made 2 Olympic teams, my PRs in terms of 10,000 were probably better, and my performances at World Cross were better. So it's not a necessarily positive, one-to-one correlation, but I think as we have more and more talent move up to the marathon, that we're going to see, better and better performances, and hopefully this very game. So I think that, where the at least the longer events in the marathon, we're seeing great things happen. And at the NCAA level, I think we're doing great. I am a little concerned, and I think it's the talk among all Division I coaches right now that due to the latest settlement of the NCAA, it may carve up the landscape of NCAA track and field, which is the real feeder sport. The feeder for our Olympic system in all the track and field events and certainly the marathon. And as a result of the settlement with the NIL money, I don't know how closely you guys have been following that, a very complicated system, but basically universities are going to be, having to pay $20+ million out a year towards this NIL settlement. And the universities are going to have to find a way to come up with those funds. And part of that, at least the rumor mill, is that there's going to be some serious shakeup among some of the other sports in regard to roster spots, in regard to scholarships, in regard to a lot of that stuff. So one of the things I've enjoyed is having a very, healthy sized roster and a number of individuals, great talent that I've had that's been willing to come for just a roster spot, are now with maybe some of the tightened roster limitations that we're facing. And nothing is official yet. We won't get word for another probably close to a year on what those limitations are going to be. But I'm just a little bit nervous that some of those opportunities that we all enjoyed coming through the college system are going to be taken away. That's going to be a real shame. And if not totally taken away, they'll at least be, I think there's going to be more parity because if we're all limited to maybe 30 roster spots and a set number of diminished scholarships, then we're going to have more talented athletes that won't have a spot at some of the major players and are going to have to find other spots. And so I'm a little bit nervous about that. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see if I'm a prophet here in the next year or two as some of these changes occur. But I'd hate to see the opportunities of our student athletes taken away because, first and foremost, the vast majority of NCAA athletes are not going to make their career as professional athletes. And the vast majority of track and field athletes are not looking for NIL money either. They just want a chance to continue their education and continue doing the sport that they love. And if that leads to, great things such as NCAA titles or participation in the Olympic trials, then more power to them. But the vast majority are just doing it because it's something they enjoy doing, something that keeps them fit, something that's a lifestyle sort of thing for them, and a way for them to pay for their college education as well. And maybe that is the way that ultimately will kind of take us from the brink, is that I think we're going to be looking at maybe some of these maybe disadvantaged athletes who would not otherwise have an opportunity for higher education. If these scholarships are diminished, then that just seems like it's unfair, and it might be against a portion of our population that otherwise has been able to be invigorated.
Ed, thanks for those thoughts. To end the podcast, we give our guests 3 fairy godmother wishes, and only 3. You can wish for 3 things for your runners in Paris or your cross-country team next fall, or all the U.S. runners, or even for your 6 daughters if you'd like.
Well, the 3 wishes. Oh boy, that's tough, and I can't go with one of those wishes being 10 wishes, I guess. You know what? I just want people to enjoy this sport and embrace it as the amazing lifestyle activity that it is. And whether you're running marathons or 5Ks or 10Ks, just to realize it's not necessarily how fast you go, although that's, how I've kind of earned my living in helping people run as fast as they can, but just getting off the couch and getting into the game, and setting a goal and working towards them. So that would be one of my wishes, that people would do that. I think we rust away more than we work away. And so, if we could get out and raise our activity level to whatever level that our bodies will allow us, and then be amazed at how far we can take it and do it and enjoy it in that realm. That would probably be my first wish. Secondly, world peace is always a really good one. Can I go with that? World peace?
Sure,
you sure can.
And world hunger on my last one. That would be awesome too. So those would be my top 3. Having said that, I really want the athletes that I coach directly to do very well at Paris. I want them at the end of the run, whether they win, place, show, I want them to feel good about the journey that they've taken. And yes, I want to see them with a medal wrapped around their neck and listening to the national anthem. That would be amazing. But you know what? There's hundreds of other athletes who have that same thing. We got to control the controllable. And I think as long as they can look back and know that I did the very best that I could, I prepared myself the best way I knew able. I ran the smartest race that I was possible. And then at the end of the day, then I think you hold your head high. And whether you're wearing that gold medal or whether you're wearing the participant medal, then I think you've had a great chance and a great opportunity. And we're going to enjoy that journey as well.
Ed, we are wishing exactly the same for your athletes in Paris. And I will add, we're hoping that they will realize how fortunate they are to have a close relationship with someone like you to steer them through all the exciting points of their lives. That wraps up things for our conversation with Ed Eyestone, Olympic marathoner, BYU coach, and coach to U.S. Olympic runners who will be going to Paris in just a month. Ed, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you,
Good
gentlemen.
luck in Paris, Ed.
Thank you, gentlemen. The pleasure has been all mine.
Amby, that was a deep and informative conversation with Ed Eyestone. What stood out for you?
Well, the first thing, George, is I recognized at some point that we didn't acknowledge we have a truly decades-long relationship with Ed, because when we were both at Runner's World, we recruited him to write a training advice column for us. And he did that for about a decade, and it was a huge hit with our readers. So we've been Ed Eyestone fans for a long time, and it comes through, I think, in this conversation. I was struck by a couple of things. First, he had admiration and praise for just about everyone in his life, and that was wonderful. It ranged from his 6 daughters, and we had a little fun discussing how anyone could have 6 daughters, to all the athletes he coaches and the other people that are part of the BYU program. He gives the athletes credit. I think that's really important. He doesn't seek it for himself. And to me, that's a sign of a great coach who's really secure with himself. When I asked him an almost critical question of Connor, I wasn't the first person to say that it looks like Connor sometimes overtrains. Ed was not critical of this. He immediately pointed out what's positive about a personality like Connor, the fact that he's got a fierce attitude. He's willing to go for it, to be the best he can, to stick his nose into every race that he's a part of. So he really turned that around into a very positive thing, which was terrific from him. I also like the basic simplicity of Ed's coaching approach. You know, he does have a master's degree in exercise science, but he's not a small picture guy. He goes for the big picture. And I loved it when he told us that with his runners, he tells them that C squared equals E squared. That's all they have to do to achieve success. What he means is C squared is consistency plus competence, and E squared is eventual excellence. And something's surely working because Ed keeps on turning out really excellent performers. George, what did you think of all of Ed's comments?
Yeah, I agree with you on the simplicity. And I think that in coaching, keep it simple often is very, very motivating. And we talked to Ed about his sort of parting advice to Connor and Clayton before the Olympic trials. And he put it very simply. He said, I gave them the 3 C's. Chill, cover, and close. And by that, he meant chill out in the early miles of the marathon. Don't go out there and push the pace. Just sit back. And in the middle stages, cover any important moves that people were making. And then in the final miles, close hard. And what else is there when it comes to running a marathon race? I mean, what strategy, and did that one work out beautifully for those two Olympians now?
They sure had a dream day in February. I'll remember that for a long, long time, I think. So that's it for this week's episode of Running State of the Sport. We hope you enjoyed joining us as much as we enjoyed sharing the time with you. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Until then, please tell your friends about Running State of the Sport. We'd also appreciate a review at your favorite podcast host like Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts. In signing off, here's our hope for the state of your own personal running. Chin up, clear eyes, full heart, keep moving. Onward.